The Rickey, Smiley Morning Show.
It's the front page news.
It's what's trending now.
A New York City jury has found former President Donald J. Trump guilty on all 34 counts in a trial in which he faced felony charges related to a 2016 hush money payment to adult film actress Stormy Daniels. And it marks the first time in history that a former United States president has been found guilty of criminal charges.
Yeah, Ricky, you remember last April, Trump pleaded not guilty to a 34-count indictment, charging him with falsifying business records in connection with that hush money payment to his then-attorney, Michael Cohen, who paid off Daniels in order to boost his electoral prospects in the 2016 presidential election. Now, sentencing is set for July 11th, just days before the Republican National Convention. Trump considers himself a very innocent man who was railroaded by an unfair trial.
This was a rigged, disgraceful trial. The real verdict is going to be November 5th by the people, and they know what happened here, and everybody knows what happened here. We didn't do a thing wrong. I'm a very innocent man. It's okay. I'm fighting for our country. I'm fighting for our Constitution. Our whole country is being rigged right now. This was done by the Biden administration.
All right, joining us this morning is the president of the Georgia NAACP, Attorney Gerald Griggs. Good morning.
Good morning, Rickey.
Oh man, happy to have you this morning. First off, Trump has 34 guilty verdicts since the first time in history a former president has been found guilty of criminal charges. What type of sentencing do you think he could be facing?
First, the historical fact, he's the first president to have been found guilty of a felony. Ulysses S. Grant was arrested for speeding in 1872 while he was in office. So he's the first one found guilty of a felony. But the punishment for each one of the 34 counts is 1 to 5 years in prison. And it's question is whether or not they will be taken together. So it's a possibility that he could serve a substantial amount of time in jail if the charges don't merge. So he's looking at a substantial amount of time in jail. Again, he is a first offender, so the judge may take that into consideration. And if he offers some mitigation evidence, it can go anywhere from probation to house arrest to actual prison time.
Wow. Good morning, Attorney Griggs. This is Maria Moore. I read this morning that some legal experts believe that he will win on appeal. They're saying that he plans to appeal way up to the U.S. Supreme Court. What are your thoughts on that, and what premise do they have to believe this?
I don't know what premise they have to believe this. 3% of criminal appeals are overturned historically. The Court of Appeals in the state of New York would have to overturn it, or the Supreme Court of the state of New York, or he would have to argue a federal issue to get into the federal system. So this is a state court case. It would have to be overturned in state court, and there's a slim possibility of that actually happening. So I get it. You know, people are upset on one side of this. Other people are celebrating on this side, on the other side. But as an attorney who does this a lot, it's very rare that cases are overturned on appeal. So I understand that they are making that argument, but I don't know how much merit it is in that argument.
Hey, Attorney Griggs, I just want to ask you, how do you think this is going to affect the election? Will they have him on like house arrest? If you had to guess?
If I had to guess, this is going to be unprecedented because, you know, they have framed this in certain conservative minds as, you know, the Biden administration going against Donald Trump. He wasn't convicted by the Biden administration. He's convicted by citizens of the state of New York after citizens of the state of New York brought charges against him. So this is a regular individual who has gone through the criminal justice process like so many other Americans and has been found guilty and should be treated the same way. But, of course, in this media arena where things are spent, it may affect the outcome of the election. But he would, if he's elected president, would have to serve from either the Department of Corrections in the state of New York or on probation. And so his rights have now been taken away, many of them by the state of New York.
I know y'all want to jump in, but I just have to say, ain't that something that you set out here and made threats against this judge and his kids? And at the end of the day, the judge is a human being. And sometimes, man, that's why you got to use discretion, you know, in court and shield, because you do not want to get the judge mad, even though the judge might not say anything. But at the end of the day, you're a human being, and your life is in his hands.
Exactly. And I mean, judges are humans. They have discretion. He may not say that he's going to punish you for the threats against his family, threats against him, the threats against the system. But he has broad discretion. And as long as he can justify the punishment as not being arbitrary and capricious, he could sentence you to prison for the rest of your natural life.
Wow. Attorney Griggs, special case. Excuse me. So now you're an attorney in Georgia, and Trump still has to come to Atlanta and face at some point these charges for the election interference trial with Fani Willis. Now, do you think that this case in any way sets a bar for that trial whenever it comes?
Absolutely. There's a rule in Georgia called 404B. That's an evidentiary rule that allows you to introduce prior bad acts of the defendant that show bent of mind, course of conduct, motive, absence of mistake, or knowledge of the offense. This was an election subversion trial where he paid hush money to a porn star to keep a case out of the media that would affect the outcome of an election. In Georgia, he's charged with attempting to subvert the will of the people through RICO conspiracy. So it's quite possible that Madam D.A. Fani Willis could file a motion to introduce this case into that case, and now he's dealing with two cases. Also, if he has another case that precedes this one, like either the federal case in D.C. or the federal case in Florida, both of which are on appeal, and he gets convicted, Georgia has the 3 strikes and you're out recidivist statute. So a judge, if he was convicted in the RICO case, would have to sentence him to the max, would have to sentence him to serve every single day of whatever sentence he has in prison in Georgia. So he faces serious criminal exposure now that he's been convicted in the state of New York for the Georgia case.
Wow.
And the only thing that could really save him, it would be to win office, to win the presidency. And he can still be a convicted felon and still run for that office, right?
Well, it wouldn't save him. What it would do is probably allow him to dismiss the federal cases, but the state cases, he can't pardon himself. So the governor of the state of New York or the Board of Pardons and Paroles here in Georgia would have to pardon him. And the chances of that happening are slim. Yeah. So he would have to serve his presidency from a Department of Corrections facility either in Georgia or in New York. And so we are in unprecedented, uncharted areas. And again, this is not an assault on democracy. This is holding an individual who has now been convicted of violating the laws of one of the several states accountable for that activity.
Attorney Griggs, real quick, we got to go, but real quick. How would this affect the swing voters and people that's on the line as to who they're going to vote for? And do you think that what it's going to do to moderate Republicans and libertarians, different ones, having a convicted felon on the ticket for the United States, the presidency?
This is one of those moments where voters have to look themselves in the mirror, look their face in the mirror and say, am I going to vote for somebody who's now been convicted of crimes against the United States, preferably crimes against the state of the United States? Am I really about law and order? Am I about maintaining the rule of law? You cannot say yes and then vote for somebody who's actually been convicted by citizens. So do I think this will affect the outcome of the election? I'm not sure, because there are groups of people who believe whatever a certain news channel tells them. But the jurors sat there for 5 weeks. They listened to evidence. Mr. Trump had an opportunity to present a defense. He attempted to present a defense that said everybody's lying. Most of the time that doesn't work. And so now it's a reckoning time for America to make a decision on who they really are going to be. We can't be hypocritical. Now, of course, the president of the NAACP, I can't tell you who to vote for, but I can sure tell you that you can believe your eyes. You can listen to the evidence. You can listen to the jurors, and hopefully the jurors will speak at some point and tell the American people what actually happened in that courtroom. Oh, and by the way, the Georgia case will be live streamed, so you get to see it for yourself.
All right, y'all, the one and only Attorney Gerald Griggs, good friend of mine, member of Alpha Phi Alpha Fraternity Incorporated. Hey, love you, man.
Love you too, bro. Thank you for the opportunity.